This is Toby Capwell, historian, author, and expert on medieval and Renaissance arms and armor. After our last Warhammer video with Toby, many of you wanted him to check out more of Total War Warhammer 3's factions. So today, he'll be sharing his thoughts on just a few.
Maybe I should ask him to rate my armor. We tried to make it realistic here, I'll show you guys here. We tried to make it realistic, like as realistic as possible.
Few of the game's armies.
It's like a monocycle with a lot of knives on it.
Oh, like a hamster wheel, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's strangely appropriate.
If you want to see Toby's thoughts on the rest of the game's factions, the wider Warhammer universes, or any other content like this, be sure to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and of course, subscribe. Now, without further ado, it's over to Toby.
You can immediately see with the design of
that?
this first faction, very obviously Chinese, but Chinese where not just...
Dude, I didn't realize they had statues with the wings. That's amazing.
The reality of Chinese arms and armor and architecture and art and design is all there, but also, you know, the belief system, the mythology, decorative iconography is all kind of actualized. And that, I mean, that immediately just screams of designers who really understand what good fantasy is. It's got that far out extreme end, but it all seems really tangible. The Chinese did have a lot of gunpowder weapons technology and flying lanterns, and its reality turned up to 11, and actually just really fun to look at. Here you're seeing sort of a somewhat fantastical construction with these big collars that come up. But there's plenty of examples in real human arms and armor of things like that. It's a good idea. Your neck and your throat must be protected. It's one of the most vulnerable areas on the human body. But at the same time, you need to be able to move your neck. You need to be able to move your head. So how can you have good mobility and good protection? Neck protection is really
tough.
There's some fantastical elements on these soldiers, but everything they're doing looks perfectly believable and practical. These guys have like kind of handheld mortars or rocket launchers. There are stubby handheld rocket launchers like this that existed in 16th century Europe, for example. It looked not unlike that.
Wow, that's
really interesting to see how a designer can really absorb a real historical, cultural aesthetic. You know, what are the rules? What are the styles? What are the decorative techniques of a real culture? And then how do we elaborate that in a fantasy? How do we extend that and still stay very grounded in the reality of it? That's what makes the non-real
these animations are so
believable. Good. Repeating crossbows. Those look like repeating crossbows. Yep, those are real. The Chinese had those.
Is the two-man shield and rifle thing, was that a real thing?
That is a real thing, to have one person operating some kind of ranged weapon, which is going to take a while to reload, and have them work closely with a shield bearer is a perfectly real thing. In my own work in Renaissance Europe, you often see that with crossbowmen. Sometimes if the shields are really big, they'll have someone carrying the shield.
And there's a shield on his back too.
Someone operating the crossbow. If they're smaller, sometimes the crossbowmen can carry their own shield, set them up, and then shoot. But having teams like that, especially if the weapons are big and cumbersome, makes perfect sense, and there's certainly a historical precedent for it. But right here, now we've got a battle that's about as non-real and fantastical as you could get. And yet, because they've spent so much effort on the reality of the design, you sort of just believe it. You just sort of accept the physical situation of this.
Yeah, I was looking at this and I was like, dude, the, I guess what you would call the cloth parts on this, like, on the terracotta warriors, it moves like cloth. I'm like, wait a second. But they're like stone. I was like, hold up, but let us suspend reality for a second. They're magical. They do not have to move precisely like stone. Why is one Mountain Dew colored? Great question. I should take a sip of that.
And they've probably given a lot of thought to how these different factions would interact with each other if the size of the fighters is very different or whatever.
Dude, they're getting thrown.
Of course, there's also the level of fantasy where you have to see how crazy it can get as well. Even at its craziest, Warhammer
Dragon Ogre
is strangely plausible. It's about it. You know, normally I would really dislike horns on helmets and spikes everywhere. It's a level of impracticality that usually irritates me. But in the case of Warhammer, I can't even really explain why it doesn't bother me. It's like they're so fully committed to what they're doing. You know, there are no half measures. Everything is as far as it can possibly go. And a lot of fantasy it doesn't have that commitment.
Fantasy is fantasy. Doesn't have to be as realistic, but it's a fair critique.
Make a few things up here and there, and they put some horns on that because they're supposed to have them. But it's like, if you're gonna do it and go all the way. It always feels like that's the kind of design aesthetic here, no matter where it takes you.
I like that the horses will have a spike on their front as well.
Oh,
so even sometimes it looks like Chaos
sick.
is just adding spikes, but every now and again you're like, that spike actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and real horse armor in the 15th and 16th century sometimes, not as much as we might think, but sometimes did have spikes on it. But spiked reins and spiked bridles were actually where you might most reasonably find it. The difficulty is with spikes on horses is that it's as dangerous, if not more dangerous, to the people who are handling those horses.
Oh, for sure.
Than anyone the horse might encounter on the enemy side. I have encountered some examples in medieval inventories of armor painted red and gold in the 14th century.
Oh.
It probably didn't look exactly like this, but King Richard II of England had tournament armor that's mentioned in the accounts of the royal wardrobe. It says it was painted red with gold stars. I like this too because, you know, the Middle Age, one thing you run into a lot when you study the Middle Ages and the Renaissance like I do is that you're constantly encountering situations that are both awe-inspiringly
really nice looking armor
and also horrifyingly awful. You know, and really beautiful things and really dreadful things kind of have this weird way of coexisting in worlds of extreme. And they're picking up on that here too. I mean, with these guys, they're kind of, you know, glamorous and pretty at the same time as they're wearing people's skulls. I have actually seen real shields that are those kind of dimensions that do actually have viewing ports in them.
Oh yeah, it makes sense.
That have, you know, little windows cut into them that you can see through when you're carrying them, and then, you know, point the weapon through as well.
Here is Sigvald's mirror guard so that you can see his beauty.
I was looking at the shields, I'm like, wow, those are like really reflective. Mirror guard for Sigvald, yeah, that totally checks. Totally checks out.
Oh right, he has to have mirrors on everybody. And that was possible historically. People often think that really, really highly polished steel surfaces must be a modern thing. But it was possible historically to get a mirror finish on iron and steel, and there was genuinely armor that was polished that way. It's just quite expensive and time-consuming. This is another thing that struck me about Warhammer, whichever iteration you end up in, is that it always seems to me to be the worst possible situation is to be an ordinary human being in these circumstances. The ordinary soldiers who have nothing special about them, like you would not want to be them. Ooh, there's a knight.
Oh,
it's not doing well.
Body.
I like this idea of like an individual combat breaking out between knightly champions in the middle of a larger battle. That's something that did genuinely happen. And, you know, high-ranking knights concerned about their reputation and their prowess might try to seek out someone and arrange for there to be
he's getting
an individual
bodied.
Combat on the battlefield. The Emperor Maximilian killed several French champions personally in his early wars against the French in the 1480s.
Oh yeah.
Dwarves. Ideas about dwarves are now well solidified in modern culture thanks to the Lord of the Rings films and so forth. Interesting thing about dwarves, because they're so identified with, stonemasonry and fortifications and mining, is a sense where architecture becomes kind of like part of their bodies almost. And their armor and their weapons look more architectural.
Yeah, I'd say it's accurate.
Than elsewhere.
I see fighting naked and blue tattoos, and I instantly think about those Picts.
There were quite a number of different ancient peoples, the Bronze Age and earlier, who fought basically naked. The Picts are famous for supposedly painting themselves. But if you imagine
that's kind of
in
cool.
a culture where almost everybody involved in the military process wears armor and as much protective equipment as they can afford or organize, turning up naked, it would make a statement. Helicopters.
A very interesting statement.
Wow. Dwarf gunships.
Yeah, these are gyrocopters.
These are
What
very accurate.
So they've got like cannons on them, or they can drop bombs.
Right. What is
Historically
power in
accurate.
these things?
You'd have
Not
to ask,
explained?
You'd have to ask a dwarf.
Have to ask someone who's more, ask the dwarves.
It reminds me of something you said, I think, when we last recorded.
Why are they on the ground? Shouldn't they be like dropping bombs or something? Isn't that what air power is for?
If you have
funny.
the potential to drop bombs on the enemy
Right.
in a battle like this,
Yes.
why would you not just do that?
Right. So there's quite a lot going on all at once here over quite a large area. Is this only 2 players still, or is this?
This is myself against an AI opponent.
But you have to be managing all these other battles.
I was thinking this gave the vibe of like showing your dad or your uncle who's like interested in talking to you, but like not knowing anything about your hobby. It's like very polite, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's nice. That's like the impression I've got from this whole video and the interaction. Like, oh, okay, cool. Tell me more about that.
You have to manage every unit on the map.
It's just kind of interesting to see how it starts to get spread out and how they've taken enough area to give a sense of what can happen on a large-scale battle. A really big battle can break up and become several smaller battles. That's often a hard thing to get a sense of from historical accounts, but when you study medieval battles from the archaeology where it's possible, you sometimes find that there's actually a fair amount of space between different parts of the action. The Battle of Bosworth is a famous English version where Richard III was famous for going down in flames with his heavy cavalry. And then in another part of the battlefield, the Duke of Norfolk is fighting the Earl of Oxford. And that, when you read the accounts, it all happens as if it's one battle. But when you look at the archaeology, those 2 parts of that battle were a kilometer or more apart from each other. And it's really 2 battles going on separately. Very difficult to manage them together when you don't have radios and drones and things. You only know what you know in your part of the battlefield. I guess when you're playing the game, you have the opportunity to pull yourself back. But I like how they've given you a sense of different parts of the action happening over quite a large area. What are they throwing?
The stone has a passenger.
What, throwing an enemy?
Yeah, they've tied a goblin to the stone.
Historically, there are examples of using siege engines for their psychological effect by throwing severed heads and dead animals and things like that.
Yeah.
I've never heard of tying people to the projectile. That's a new one.
If it was a prisoner of war, I could see that working.
Let your loyalty be your armor!
Here's the Kislev faction.
Boy, they really go all over the place.
Yeah, this is the faction that's in the snowy eastern region of human-occupied Old World.
Oh.
Their axe muskets are kind of an interesting idea. That's
I didn't realize they were
fantastical
muskets, too.
response to a real-world problem that was really challenging.
The axe muskets remind me of the Custodes spears. So some of them are the axes instead. It makes me think of that. But Custodes obviously have the better version.
And caused a lot of trouble for a long time. With the introduction of gunpowder weapons to late medieval and Renaissance armies, these are weapons that go bang once, and then they take a while to reload.
Yeah.
And they're not super accurate, so you need a lot of them for mass shooting to get some kind of devastating effect. But the problem with that is, of course, what do your musketeers then do at close range? How do they protect themselves, especially from cavalry? Initially, the answer was that you use musketeers in concert with pikemen. And the long spears of the pikemen guard the musketeers and give them the kind of movable fortification safety that they need to reload and shoot again and so forth. But that means your men are highly specialized. The pikeman can do nothing else but hold his spear out. The musketeer can do nothing but shoot once every couple of minutes. And it's not efficient from the point of view of manpower. What you really need is a way that the musketeers can defend themselves at close range.
Okay. And
it seems obvious when you know, but the bayonet was the answer to that. But it took quite a long time to evolve to the point when it was really a practical advance. And it seems like our sort of fantasy Russian soldiers here have taken a different attitude and made sure they've got a two-handed axe built into their musket. But that's the capacity of these physical objects to tell the story and to give a sense that the culture you're dealing with here has a history and has evolved culturally and technologically over time.
Including
the physical objects.
I like how he's including like actual history in this. It makes it really kind of cool to listen to.
The weapons, the armor, the clothing, all of that has the power to express all of that visually, which is why it's so important that video game designers know what they're doing with this stuff. If they do it right, it can be so amazingly effective in visual storytelling. Hussars, winged hussars. Yeah, that's a real thing. The Polish winged hussars of the 17th century had wings just like that.
Oh, really?
Bears.
They didn't ride bears, no. There's a lot of nice reference here to real
that's
Polish
so cool.
cavalry armor of the 17th century, when there was a kind of a revival,
really neat.
A conscious revival of armored cavalry and the wearing of plate armor. Long after it had kind of fallen out of use, it was brought back in the 17th century. You see a lot of these motifs like the embossed scales and things on the plates. There's a fabulous collection of Polish winged hussar armor in the Warsaw Army Museum. And there's not a lot written about it in the English language literature, only because it's
makes
only
me think of the
started to
Eldar
really
too.
be studied comparatively recently, but it's something I'd like to work more on. It's really, really interesting stuff. The Polish winged hussars are also characterized by having those sort of spherical guards on their spears.
What was the purpose of the wings?
I think there's some debate about that, but really it just looks amazing. That is an example.
Aura farming, that's why. Okay, so you say hussar. I always say hussar. So it's hussar. Is that correct? Yeah, as in hussar. That's how you say it? It goes hard. I mean, I won't lie. It looks so cool.
Example in reality where looking cool and having the right visual impact when you charge down the hill onto your enemies, it's important. Psychological effect. All right, bear chariots
bear
with
cavalry,
magical ice underneath them or something.
Yeah, because they're war sleds.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of ice motifs with this faction. This is Katerina.
Cool, son.
Ice witch leader of the faction.
Shades of Narnia there.
She's not going to offer you any
Turkish delight.
Turkish delight.
Yeah, gross, disgusting stuff.
You know what? Looking at this, you know what I would love to see what their library looks like. Do these designers have like a company library somewhere? Because if they do, they've probably got quite a lot of the right books.
Oh yeah.
Rat people. That weapon he's got is very close to a real weapon called a man catcher. fittingly enough,
to disarm
for a rat
and catch
to be
a man.
wielding a man catcher, right? But that's a real thing. It's a spring-loaded weapon that captures someone around the neck. But that's a nice case of, you know, reversing the world order and the rats catching the men as opposed to the other way around. Very medieval idea, actually. These guys have whips or something?
Slings.
Slings, very good. Always like to see slings. You know, there's been a fair amount
You don't
of
see 'em
ancient Greek
a lot.
sling bullets, lead sling bullets that have been found in archaeological excavations.
Sling bullets.
And they very frequently have insulting messages written on them. As if getting hit in the head with a lead sling bullet wasn't bad
That's
enough.
so
Here we get
funny.
into some of the weird Skaven machinery. This is basically their equivalent of cavalry. They make strange machines to charge into the enemy instead. It's like a monocycle with a lot of knives on it.
Oh, like a hamster wheel, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's strangely appropriate. There's the shield bearer gun teams again.
Warplock
Same idea.
Jezzails.
Yeah, nice.
Because a Jezzail was a real type of long
Yeah,
musket, right?
yeah. It's most typically.
Oh, that's cool, and they
an
help him
Afghan
load,
long
too.
gun. Oh, I love the whole reloading sequence. That's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
We haven't seen that before. Gatling guns.
Rattling gunners. That wasn't my pun, that's what they're called in game.
Right. Are they hand cranked?
Yeah.
The weird triangular shields as well. That's an interesting reminder, though, you know, that sometimes really departing from any sort of human practicality or authenticity, you consciously do something that you know no real human culture did, like, you know, shields shaped like an equilateral triangle. That can have a design benefit that impracticality
Branding.
has its uses when you want something to look consciously non-human, alien, harder to identify with, harder to understand.
Dude,
I
that
would
guy's
never claim
huge.
that doing impractical things in fantasy
I think that was Queek head taker, and he looked massive next to those humans.
design is always a bad thing. Sometimes it really serves the purpose quite exactly, but it has to be done intelligently and consciously. Sometimes you get
Ew.
impractical things done where they're not
Oh,
aware
ew.
that they're impractical. But I think in Warhammer they know exactly
Nasty.
what they're doing.
Ooh. Oh, yes. Oh, I love the armor.
These are vampires?
Yeah, the vampire counts are a
Vampire
wholly
count.
undead faction.
Right.
The vampires are like the lords and nobles, so they become knights.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the standard infantry are just raised dead skeletons and zombies. that
Right,
have-
right. Oh, I see.
Vampires are, you know, they retain their independence, whereas the rank and file are under control of the vampires. Lots of very aged metal in this faction.
I like the
Rather than
vampire
spend a lot of time
armor.
Underground.
Right, right. And they've all got scythes, is that right?
Some of them use scythes, but a lot of them have the
Swords, yeah.
You guys are pole arms.
Fight books, martial arts manuals often refer to scythe fighting. There were techniques for fighting with scythes, though not.
Doesn't seem like
not
it'd
on
be
horseback.
super effective. Yeah,
because
on a
they're
horse
raised
for
dead,
sure
they
not
sort of
effective.
still have the same clothes on they had when they died.
But a lot of this is sort of early 16th century German Landsknecht sort of style, which is interesting because the Landsknechts in the early 16th century had this very kind of gruesome fatalistic culture. And a lot of the art that's inspired by them or that grows out of that culture often shows, you know, reanimated corpses and the specter of death seducing a woman and all these kind of motifs. Again, it's very consistent in taking the kind of artistic motifs, the mythology, the belief system, and then just literalizing the whole thing. Whether it's Europe, China, Poland,
Oh, the
wherever.
plague
they
cart.
do that across the board
Ooh.
very consistently. And it leads in all kinds of unexpected directions. I was just thinking it's kind of fun to see these two fighting where you have a human army that looks very much like a 16th century Renaissance army, but then the supernatural faction is kind of stylistically consistent. It's like that army is made up of the dead of the other side.
The living one, yeah.
It all has this kind of internal consistency.
Bring out your
that is-
dead.
I'm still kind of amazed that they manage to retain that going as far as they do with their ideas, that that it all still kind of hangs together and obeys whatever, rules they've set down for it. It seems like it has a really strong kind of conceptual structure. I don't know whether they have a design rule book somewhere or whether they're just, it's just a very consistent vision. This just proves the point that fantasy is not just about making random stuff up off the top of your head. A fantastic amount of work goes into it. In fact, just as much work goes into good fantasy as doing something that's historically authentic. More so in some ways, because you first have to establish what the historical authenticity is, and then you have to work out where you're going to go with it. I hate that argument.
So that you're basically taking the baseline of like, okay, what are we basing it off of? So I'm basically saying what he said, but you even go further because like, okay, it's historical, but how do we make it even more interesting? How can we develop it even further? And I think that's a really good point because that in a way requires more work. Like developing what my armor was going to look like took a little bit of time because there were some parts that I did want it to have a very Warhammer feel, but still be a little bit more realistic than what you would normally see for other like VTuber armors and what you like see there. I took a lot of inspiration from a bunch of different things, but still wanted it to look accurate. And it took more time than just being like, let's copy and paste this armor.
Fantasy, you can do whatever you want, because it's just sort of lazy.
It is, I agree.
It should still be a plausible, consistent internal environment that has some kind of rules and laws and style and culture. And, you should have to put a fair amount of work into coming up with that and not just feel that you have the right to disregard anything, I guess one thing is easy to lose track of when you're being a critic of these things is the fact that they are also supposed to be fun. But it's nice to see that the hard work and good design can be fun as well. And that's something I've run into a lot in the industry, is this prevailing assumption that if we pay too much attention to reality or history, if we do our homework and if what we do is historically authentic, then it will by definition be boring and uninteresting.
Oh, no,
this
not
idea
the case.
that historical accuracy is the same as boring. It's a shame because look what you can come up with when you do have a regard for historical reality. I mean, obviously, here they're going quite far beyond that, but they wouldn't have gotten here without that, that historical foundation. All of this is growing out of their literacy of real history, real art, real mythology.
Thank you so much for watching. Remember to comment.
Solid video. I like that a lot. I really liked how he brought in some historical thing. I thought he was going to be a little bit more like specific, like, oh yeah, like rating it. But I did like all the different pieces he brought in. I was like, oh wow, he clearly knows his stuff.